Pragmata is not gonna blow your mind. Pragmata won't dethrone your favorite game. It probably won't even dethrone Capcom's latest. Pragmata is so far from Game of the Year that it isn't even a conversation worth having. Now hold on, stick around. This ain't a bad thing. Because none of that means, well, anything to this game. And it meant just as little to those who developed it. I don't say this to imply that they didn't care, rather that they cared and do care a whole lot more than most. Enough to stay steadfast and stick to a solid vision. Nothing more to muddy the waters, but definitely nothing less. No entertainment industry needs every project to be a shot at the best, and our industry thrives atop the back of every good game to hold the line when those projects fail to meet the wicked expectations they set for themselves. Yes, in a perfect world, every new release would carve itself a spot in the Hall of Fame. But in the only world we've got, and one in conflict between the endless pursuit of greatness and the simple desire to make a damn video game, Pragmata is the perfect soldier.
Bypassing first and second firewall, hooking control protocols. Analyzing, converting the interrupt matrix. Visualization complete. Initiating hack!
Back off!
Between this and Resident Evil Requiem, Capcom has mastered the art of making games play like games. If that sounds redundant, let me clarify. Why would this increasingly hostile care center boast a room with power-ups specific to Grace's efforts in conquering it, locked behind a paywall of collectible coins, no less? Well, the same reason this increasingly hostile research facility boasts stamp boards sheltering various goodies specific to Hugh's efforts in conquering it, locked behind a paywall of collectible coins, no less. It's simple, really. Both are a great way to encourage exploration. These systems let completionists collect because that's their game, and casual players are given real, tangible rewards for going that extra mile. From the medium's conception, video games have been all about collectibles, power-ups, upgrades, levels. Immersion, as a relatively new variable, doesn't have to be mutually exclusive in this equation. Look, I appreciate a painstaking commitment to immersion as much as the next guy. Red Dead Redemption 2 is one of the best games I've ever played, but none of what makes that game a fantastic experience needs to eat into all that gaminess we've just discussed, because gaming has a default suspension of disbelief baked into it from the start. In other words, we don't care as much as they think. Pragmata takes that reality by as many balls as a reality might have and rings it for all it's worth. Now, all you need to know for this part of the review is that Hugh and his team are sent to investigate a remote lunar research facility gone mysteriously radio silent. Shit hits the fan, everyone kicks the proverbial bucket, except Hugh, who is saved by a young android that he himself names Diana because who wants to have to say DI03367 all the time, right? Their partnership drives gameplay in a really unique way. Diana isn't your average companion and isn't a burden to Hugh. In fact, she's the only reason he can hurt the army of weaponized androids and robots a sinister AI called Edis sends his way. Without her hacking ability, his weapons are borderline useless. This dual control between Hugh and Diana is Pragmata's claim to fame. Hacking these robots isn't as straightforward as it might be in another game. Instead, Diana brings up a grid and I was forced to navigate it using the face buttons on my controller. It's certainly functional on a keyboard and mouse, by the way, and at the tippity top of skill expression, I can see how someone might get really fucking fast, but for most of you, controller is the way to go. The weapon selection interface even looks like a D-pad. Anyhow, it's again not so simple as finding the quickest route to that little green square. In the beginning, there are blue nodes that increase the potency of that hack, and before I knew it, I was deciding mid-combat which specific yellow node I should hit to match the situation I'm dealing with, accounting for the fact that these nodes aren't infinite, and I don't want to find myself stuck with basic hacking in a difficult fight later on. Perhaps there's a group of walkers, and I run it through a multi-hack node that'll let me shatter all of their defenses at once. There are 8 of these yellow nodes, and that's still leaving out a whole lot. Not only are there hacking nodes, there are hacking modes, which allowed me to specialize into heat buildup, and once that heat gauge is full, Hugh can get in close and deliver an exceptionally powerful attack. All of this is trickle-fed in a way that makes it confusing as shit for those unfamiliar, don't get me wrong, but it became almost like a second language to me. This is without Hugh's contribution either, which is mostly stock standard third-person shooter gameplay, but in combination adds an entirely separate layer to master. Once Diana has done her part, Hugh can capitalize in many different ways. His primary weapon needs to cool down and reload slowly, but will never run out of ammunition. Hitting the various weak points highlighted is essential here. However, his arsenal quickly becomes much more than that. Hugh has access to many different weapons, each placed into one of 3 categories. Attack units. This is self-explanatory. The shockwave gun was my pick. I love chunky shotguns in games, and this was no different. Tactical units. These weapons are utility-based. Harkening back to that multi-hack node, using the node in combination with the riot blaster made for some pretty satisfying clears. And defense units. Self-explanatory also. I like to get the drone hive going to lighten the load when there were too many enemies for me to fight at one time. If they happen to get a little too close, Hugh can quickly reposition using his suit's thrusters. And when I got a little insecure about how bloody tall these androids are, I could float above them using the same thrusters. Variety is key here. Capcom has done their due diligence, and the game truly kept me guessing until the very end. Variety in weapons, variety in approach, and variety in enemies. Pragmata flaunts around 20 unique enemy types, not including the various bosses sprinkled throughout the experience. With a runtime of 13 to 15 hours for a non-completionist playthrough, that's 1 to 2 additions to spice up combat every hour. Walkers, crushers, but also watchers, spiders, and whoever designed the executor, well, I don't know what to say to you. You know, one day I'd like to see a roster of robotic enemies that aren't designed to foreshadow their murderous tendencies. Where's the Roomba that just fucking rams your ankles? It can't just be the evil looking ones that turn evil. Anyways, I just have to highlight Capcom's boss design here. No, not because it's good. It's absolutely fine, but I must commend their commitment to keeping almost every boss encounter unique and memorable. There are seldom repeats or reskins. If there are, they'd earned it beforehand, and they'd earned the finale of each level. These enemies, bosses, and their subsequent combat encounters populate a level design philosophy more thoughtful than it might seem to explore. It's a very silent kind of good level design. There was never a moment like realizing this unassuming elevator in the undead parish led straight back to Firelink Shrine. I never found myself thinking, wow, this is really cool level design, but I appreciated it from beginning to end, even if I didn't consciously acknowledge it. The game is neatly broken up into levels, each with a theme, a goal, and a boss at the end to tie everything up. Exploring these levels is frictionless without feeling mindless. I hardly struggled to know where I wanted to go or to solve a puzzle I needed to solve, but every path chosen and solution presented stimulated those neurons just enough to keep me engaged. And I suspect it'll do the same for you. Now, on the off chance I hit my head and those neurons are few and far between that day, there's a handy checklist for each level and the area surrounding each checkpoint. Also, yes, the enemies do respawn. In between these wonderfully crafted and well-contained levels, our titular characters rest their bones, or Hugh rests his bones, anyways, they rest at a very convenient shelter. This shelter is equipped with literally every single thing they could ever need, and to reiterate my earlier point, I don't care. This is where the player has a very, very easy time suspending their disbelief, and I was just the same. For all intents and purposes, this is the hub area. It's carefully arranged to help Hugh and Diana prepare for their next trek deeper into the facility. It's the place where I got to spend all these shiny resources I obsessively searched for. Hugh can upgrade his weapons and abilities, Diana can prepare new nodes, and they can both upgrade their general performance. There's a ton more freedom here than you'd think. Outfitting before any given level let me really rack my brain over how I wanted to approach the game. There are a plethora of mods to equip, and I ended the game with as many damage amplifiers as possible, including neglecting my health bar in favor of even more damage. Not only through the upgrade system, but through a risky mod that halved my health for an extra 20% damage on top of everything else. In truth, this last mod was the only real risky choice I made, as it left me with around 500 health. That's enough for a few of the bots to one-shot me. Otherwise, the game on its standard difficulty was just that. Pretty standard. Never too easy, mind you, but never that difficult either. Many of these mods can be discovered within the levels themselves, but for even juicier engagement bait, the shelter comes with this little jubilant fella. Cabin. Cabin gave me access to the stamp board I mentioned way back when. He'll ask for cabin coins in exchange for mods, additions to the model viewer, extra lore, keys for the red challenge rooms littered about, and a few outfits for the cosmetic obsessed like yours truly. But on a bingo, triple bingo, and a full blackout of the board, it offers more outfits, new hacking nodes, and even new weapons. Yes, this system is non-optional. Now, I wasn't forced to participate in capitalist bingo, but there is far too much on offer to ignore it, so for clarity's sake, it's non-optional for the best experience. Thankfully, cabin coins aren't only relegated to the nooks and crannies of the facility. They come as rewards for finding Reed Earth memories and for completing training simulations. The former being a unique collectible you can gift to Diana and thus spice up the shelter away from its clinical origins. The latter being pretty obvious, but in saying that, these training simulations were consistently more inspired and enjoyable than any other game with a similar system. It came as a real nice break from the general gameplay loop of Pragmata and offered a way to refine my mechanical skills in interesting ways with a cabin coin shaped dopamine hit at the end to satisfy my ADHD addled brain. All of these carefully considered systems conglomerate into one of the most cohesive and tightly designed gameplay experiences we as a community could ever have hoped for. I adore the attention given to player freedom, but in a structured way that highlights the thoughtful variety drip-fed to you at a near perfect pace, with difficulty scaling to match. Coupling this with a healthy dose of innovative design, and Diana's contribution to the combat loop really drives it home as I guess a quiet triumph. And if you're the kind of person that isn't finished with a game once the credits roll, this one has you covered with new weapons, new mods, enhanced bosses, new challenges to overcome, new rewards. It really has it all. I'm not the type to stick with a game like this for hours and hours beyond its conclusion, but I'm happy to see a game take care of those that are. Not as an update 6 months later, but from day one. As overwhelmingly positive as this section is, it remains that way because Pragmata knew what it was. It never tried to be more. Sometimes a game really flourishes when it understands its place, and that restriction, that reality allowed Capcom to deliver a game I can hardly fault for anything. You know, unlike what I wrote all those years back in that little Steam review, I don't think they needed to aim higher this time around. Consistency is Pragmata's achievement, and that's as commendable as any. Oh, and as the only time I'll mention this little controversy, for all the proverbial fucking Catholic priests that have infected the discourse surrounding this game, I know this may sound a little crazy, and I'm sorry you have to hear this from me, guys, but I don't actually condone the sexualization of children. So get help or get fucked. Or how about this, get help and get fucked. You're really, truly, genuinely, with all my heart, not fucking welcome here. Capiche? Back to it then. If you played Resident Evil Requiem, or any other Capcom title, except Monster Hunter Wilds, we'll shimmy by that one, you'd know that when the time comes to narrow your focus on the technical side of things, they almost always score high. That is due in part to how reliable the RE engine has been since its conception alongside Resident Evil Biohazard. It's optimized best for dense, deliberate spaces and environments, which is how it routinely bucks the trend of AAA games performing like absolute dog shit, and how it does the same for Pragmata. There's not much really to say on this front. It performs just as well as you'd expect, with the exact same caveats made in my Resident Evil Requiem review. Now, I'm assuming you haven't watched it, because if all of you did, this video hasn't done so well, so I'll reiterate, Pragmata isn't feasible at its best. Just like almost any game with path tracing available. It's experimental and hardly worth the performance cost on even the newest hardware. But the caveat to the caveat is that just like Capcom's latest and greatest, this game suffers from a seemingly poor, but still better than dynamic lighting, implementation of ray tracing. And that in turn causes a noticeable grain or distortion effect on certain surfaces and in certain environments. This is the denoiser's doing. I won't get all granular about how it works, but it's there and it's pretty ugly. The best solution available short of no ray tracing is ray reconstruction, which is bundled with path tracing. Sometimes I wish games would omit the experimental settings because it's hard to know I can have it better without the means to have it better, you know? Anyhow, that's about it for any real critique on the subject. Overall, the game looks just as fantastic as I knew it would going in. We've got the stock standard, right? Nice textures, check. Great lighting and shadow work, check. Exceptional modeling for both static and dynamic props, check. AAA class animation work and cutscene direction, check. Flashy high definition particle effects, check. There's a baseline here and it does not struggle to meet it. Pragmata sports some great vistas to bring all of that I just mentioned together, and despite being set on a moon base, a host of diverse environments too. They may be 3D printed, but Capcom spared no expense making them look like the real thing. From the claustrophobically quiet surface of the moon herself to overgrown laboratories and sterile research facilities, it remains a feast for the eyes from start to finish. While variety in environments and variety in enemy behavior is stellar, the robots and androids themselves are more of a mixed bag here. Differing physically, but almost all wearing the same coat of paint. It more than makes sense within this world and follows its rules to a T, but none of them really wowed me. Though it swiftly returns to form when the bots open up and flash their weak points. Seeing the internal machinery exposed like that made it very satisfying to pump them full of lead, or whatever comes out of the barrels of Hugh's guns. Hugh himself and the rest of the cast are graced with some all-around very solid voice acting. Actually, well, kinda. Everyone else is great. Hugh was a mixed bag for me. I get that he's mostly talking to a kid, so I can forgive the parental, very deliberate cadence there, but he has a patronizing spin to almost everything he says. Now, I know there's better delivery under it, as he shows with every line my almost everything he says doesn't account for, so I'm leaning towards a direction issue in this case. The same goes for Diana, but she doesn't magically grow up and stop being a kid at any point, so it's immediately forgivable and more appropriate. Soundtrack-wise, this game is again a mixed bag, but in a different way. And I've been having this issue for a little while now when writing these reviews. Besides the more explicit piano-centric tracks, I don't actually recall much of what I heard in the soundtrack. I understand that this is because it does exactly what is required of it and blends perfectly into the atmosphere it aims to complement, but I gather that might be unsatisfying for some of you. I know when a soundtrack is amazing, and I know when a soundtrack sucks, but it's hard to analyze music that perhaps does its job too well. I did like that piano though, it's very sweet and memorable. The soundscape as a whole follows suit, but I did retain a little more of that satisfying punch Hugh's weaponry has, and the sinister chatter of the AI-powered androids. Finally, I can break the monotony of a rather straightforward critique, quote end quote, with an outlier here. I loved the UI. It's perfectly inspired by the kind of game I'd play over and over again when I was a kid. But just the demo, because mum or dad didn't want to buy me another game and I'd already played Skate 3 to death. On that note, I see many comparisons to Vanquish, which is from that era, and I see it, but my parents never bought me that game. So you guessed it, I did play the demo over and over again. I miss when demos were an expected thing. Anyhow, nostalgia aside, the UI is designed more than competently. It's minimalistic where it needs to be, but it doesn't neglect how much better off a game is when the UI is themed to match it. Not once did I find the hacking minigame visually confusing, which is a marvel considering its respectable scope. I know we expected as much, but Capcom has done it again. Pragmata doesn't falter in any area, but within the grounds of cutting-edge fidelity and its very common misfortunes. Everything has its place here, and they all fit like a circle in a square hole, that is, as intended. Individually ranking these aspects doesn't do justice to how much I appreciate a consistent vision and standard of quality, and how much work goes into keeping them aligned with a game director's greater vision. I'm saying vision a lot. From a visually creative standpoint, I don't place Capcom among the best of the best, but much like Pragmata as a game, their superpower is consistency. And here, it is no different.
I'm Hugh. I don't do babysitting, but I'm gonna need your help, and,
Hugh. Diana.
Yeah.
Hugh. Diana. Hugh. Diana. Hugh. Diana! Hugh! Diana! Hugh! Diana! Hugh! Diana!
Kids.
To remind you, and to delve a little deeper, Pragmata opens as Hugh in a 4-man investigation team commissioned by Delphi Corporation enter a Delphi-owned lunar research facility specializing in the unearthing, or unmooning I guess, of a wondrous new ore that when refined can be used to create almost anything. It is their job to figure out why this facility has gone completely radio silent. As these things often go, his whole team is wiped from the face of the moon by a moonquake, and if that didn't do the job, the rogue AI Edis and its army of robots certainly will. But not Hugh, he is saved by a lone android, sheltered from the world and seemingly unaffected by Edis. He names her Diana. Pragmata heavily relies on one thing to carry the rest of its narrative, else all will fall on uninterested ears. Being Hugh and Diana's relationship. If the player doesn't internalize their bond, the rest of everything else will seem like absolute trite. Because this isn't an original story beyond the specifics, and it isn't a nuanced tale of an earned bond between unlikely companions, Hugh and Diana are dad and daughter material from the jump. Now that doesn't have to be a bad thing, but you should be aware of that going in. It's a simple story, reminiscent of a million other similar ones. You have to want it, and be at peace with that to really enjoy it. Thankfully, most players were, and so was I. Yes, look, it's a cornball, moon, cheeseball game through and through. The writers ham up that emotion. Everything you'd expect to happen in a story like this will happen, trust me. Sometimes it gets to the point of being a little bit manufactured, but I like the honesty of it. Hugh is sweet, caring, and wants nothing less than the best for this little android and probably everyone else around him. At every turn, he's teaching Diana something new about Earth or about himself. He can shoot the shit with her in the shelter, and while the writing at a granular level is pretty standard, their dynamic is really fun to watch. Diana is as curious as curiosity gets for a child, but with the added fact that she's an android with a few gaps in her knowledge of the fundamentals that make us human. She'll learn to have fun and to love throughout this journey, and again, while it's all very convenient and perfect, sometimes it's okay to put a little cheese in your boots, for that pep in your step. I hope I've been clear, without a harshness that is unwarranted, mind you, about this story not being quite as special as its overwhelmingly positive reviews might have you believe. It was more than enough to motivate me, and I really did enjoy unraveling the little mystery that was this research facility, through central story beats and the little tidbits of lore scattered about, but, I wouldn't play this game for the story. I really wouldn't. However, this verdict hits on a common theme here, and that is again, consistency. Sure, I'd say this is one of the weaker parts of the game, but for the sake of neatness, this game outputs a baseline of quality that is unshaken throughout. And this heartwarming and smartly contained narrative is a prime example. But on another hand, more unique to its narrative, Pragmata demands a buy-in from the player. As I said, you have to want to consume a story like this. If you're opposed, or even solidly neutral, it may shatter under the weight of its familiarity. Hey, if you're still with me, I'm James, and this is the Waffle Iron. I like to rate my games a little differently, like waffles hot off the iron from raw right on through to crispy, golden perfection. And if the bite is right, maybe a dash of syrup. Now, while we wait, let's condense this review into something more digestible. Because it seems overwhelmingly positive, I get it, even with the sprinkling of measured critique I've made sure to include. But you see, Pragmata is a game that doesn't demand a whole lot of itself, nor does it demand more than cooperation from the player. Pragmata is the best that a game like this could ever be, and if you want it, you'll find almost no fault. This game didn't shoot for the stars, and thus it will never reach them. But here's an analogy, because I'm literally about to order one. Take an HSP, a halal snack pack, Australian delicacy you wouldn't understand. It's a late night comfort food, marinated meat, crispy chips, as much sauce as you want. In the right circumstances, this will be the best fucking thing you've ever tasted in your life. And it is good eats, no doubt. But am I gonna slap it down next to the most perfect filet mignon? Well, maybe, but in Pragmata's case, no. That doesn't mean I don't love it, and it doesn't mean I'd always pick the filet mignon. I sunk 1,000 hours into Rocket League, for fuck's sake. That's like a store-bought spring roll. I like Pragmata, and in the grand scheme of things, my critique is kinda negligible. So I really don't think it'll come out any less than fluffy.
We don't